Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to assemble a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character trait at a time. And it all starts with one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. This is episode 21, Measuring a Character Trait by Measuring the Voices. Yesterday, we went through the taxonomy of the character traits, the section on composition. And we saw that a character trait was composed of three different elements: a struggle, a victory state, and a loss state. Each of these elements represented an emotion, and the entire character trait is classified by the triad of emotions that are expressed in the character trait. The emotions are the emotions of the struggle, should I or shouldn't I, the emotions of victory, and the emotions of loss. We were able to see how the different levels of awareness can be classified by the existence, presence, or absence of these three elements. Tonight we revisit this to talk about how this comes about, what are the underlying processes, and we will see that the processes themselves are what produces the classification. And of course, that is the very definition of a taxonomy as opposed to a classification system. If we're starting with a classification system, we're defining categories, hopefully logically, but basically, bottom line, they're arbitrary. And the requirements of a classification system are that you have clear rules for inclusion and exclusion, and you can tell any element whether it belongs in the classification by answering the questions about the observable attributes. A taxonomy goes a little deeper. A taxonomy says, there's something going on in the system. And because of a process that's happening in the system, these categories or these separations are emerging out of that process. So a taxonomy is a way of saying we observe something happening in nature, and then we give a name to what we observe, but really the more important element is the underlying process that gives rise to the diversity. Then we name the diversity for convenience. So let's see how that comes into play with the taxonomy of the levels of awareness, the dimension of a character trait that we started yesterday. We'll begin as we did yesterday with what's called the zone of awareness. And we call it the zone of awareness because what it means is that in the character, there is a struggle going on. The character is aware of the struggle. The character will make a conscious choice between the victory state and the loss state. And the outcome of that choice will be within the ability of the character to make the choice and to drive the direction. The predominating factor in the zone of awareness is the struggle. The struggle is the main thing that's going on. But along with that struggle is the presence of a victory state, at least in potential form, and a loss state, at least in potential form. So there are three different voices going on in the mind of the character who is in this zone of awareness struggling with a rudder character trait. The struggle, the voice of the loss, the voice of the victory, and the voice arguing for one side or the other. They're all playing in the character's mind at one time. That is the underlying process that's taking place, which causes us to say, aha, that character trait is in the zone of awareness. That character trait for this character is a rudder trait. In the course of the events of the story, if you have a character who very frequently chooses the lost side of the decision in the struggle and over again chooses the lost side instead of the victory side, the victory side voice will fade. The possibility of obtaining a victory will seem more and more and more remote, and that voice will become quieter and quieter and quieter. And you'll reach the stage where the only two voices that are playing in the character's mind are the idea of a struggle. I should be struggling with this. I should be struggling with this. And the much stronger presence of the feeling of a loss. So the struggle has weakened, the loss has grown, and the concept of a victory, that victory voice saying, we could do this, has just faded into the background. So when you only have those two voices going in the mind of the character, a strong voice of loss and a weaker voice of struggle, that is the actuality that makes us say, the character is in the zone of chaos, and the character trait is a wing trait. There is a cause that makes us categorize it this way. Continuing further in that spectrum, when you reach the spot where even the struggle disappears, that even the I ought to be trying, that voice has so seldom been listened to that it's gone, and now all you have is the voice of I'm doomed, I'm a failure, I'm a wreck, I'm destroyed. All of the negative things are the only thing that's left. Then, when there's one predominating voice left in the mind of your character, and it's the voice of loss, then we say that character trait is in the zone of aspiration, and we call it a pinnacle trait. Hopefully, in a journey of recovery, in a journey of redemption, that order will be that you'll begin at a pinnacle trait, you'll bring up the thought of a struggle reaching the zone of chaos, and eventually struggling will bring it into the rudder position. So hopefully you will see a cascade of development towards control. Now, moving to the other side of the zone of awareness, towards the victory side, you have a situation where the struggle has so often been won on the side of the victory. It's been decided again and again for the victory state. Pretty soon that victory voice is the one that predominates, and the struggle weakens. You don't need to struggle very much, and the lost state just goes silent. And you have two voices left when you're faced with a situation. The victory predominates most of the time. Occasionally there's a temptation to struggle, but not often. When this occurs, when you have these two voices, the victory voice and the struggle voice are the two remaining voices in the mind of the character for this character trait, then we say that character trait is in the zone of stability, and the trait is an anchor trait. Finally, when the struggle is so seldom even coming up at all, and there's only the victory voice in the mind of the character, there's one and only one voice. Well, of course we're going to do it. Then we say, when we see just that one voice operating for this character trait in the mind of our character, then we will say that character trait is in the zone of being, and it is a base trait for this character. What's really interesting now about all of these zones that we classified yesterday, we now see today how there is an operation of forces, a coming into and out of existence of a number of voices. And we summarized it on this chart where we show the voices coming into and out of play. Here there's only the loss voice. Now here the struggle voice comes in. It's weak, but it's present. In the rudder position, all three voices are active. Down here in the anchor position, the lost voice drops out, and in the mind of the character, there's only the two voices of victory and struggle, down to the bass trait, where the only voice is the voice of victory. And that is the taxonomy of the levels of awareness of a character trait.